Oh, good. They're getting easier and more practice. That is what I like to hear. So that is awesome. We're definitely gonna do a few more. I was looking up some other ones that I thought had good investigative tasks. So because it looks like from what you guys were saying, the layout was that most likely you'll still have one of those. So I was trying to find ones that I thought would be helpful for you guys. So I pulled a couple other ones that we'll do. Yeah, chapter 7, 8 actually, and like that kind of lumps into probability, definitely comes up quite a bit. I would probably guess that one of the questions will have to do with probability on the free response if I was going to guess, because probability really is actually chapter 6, 7, and 8. So it's a good chunk. But sometimes the way they write the questions is that one question can use different chapters. So, part of it could be probability, and then you could do a hypothesis test with it, and that would all be in one question. So, but yeah, I would definitely review those sections. So the one that I'm going to assign you guys today, the investigative task, has to do a little bit more with probability. So I think that will be helpful for you guys too. Okay. Well, I don't know if we're going to get anybody else to join on here, so we'll just get started. And again, I have a whiteboard because the Google Meet is just, I don't like it as much as Zoom, but there's just security issues with Zoom and all that stuff. So here we are. And so let's start with the free response. You guys had the 2016 test to do, the free response test. So if you have questions on either the whole question or part of a question, go ahead and type that in the chat. Oh, did I write 10? Sorry if I wrote 10. That's probably why not as many people are here. Whoops. Oh well. Did I write 10? I thought I wrote 9:30 in the I wrote 9:30. Maybe I said 10 though in the last meeting, so that was maybe misleading. Sorry. Well, they can just watch the replay, but I am recording it, so that's good. So do any of you guys have, oh yeah, the last one I did do at 10 because I did an algebra one before it, so I pushed it back a little bit. Yeah, that's probably my bad. I'll pick a time and stick with it so you don't confuse you guys. So for question 5C, I was wondering why it would have to be a t interval isn't a valid answer. Okay, let me look at the questions. Oh, why a t interval wouldn't be a valid answer? Well, you're doing proportions. So, I mean, very basically, proportions, you don't do a t interval. So even though you're doing a difference, the proportions, you have to do a z interval. So if you said, are you talking about on the scoring guideline? Did it say if you said that? Oh, sorry. No, I'm looking at. Okay, so, well, for proportions, you would have to do a z, not a t. So that kind of is why they specifically said that. But for here, these all came from the same sample. So they just did one sample and then said, certain people prefer this, or no preference. And so you also can't do that because they're not independent. They're not two separate samples. They're going to be just like the opposite almost. I mean, there's three categories. It's almost like the opposite outcome of the one value. So you would have to do a separate sample so that they'd be independent so that you could actually compare them. There's kind of two things that are happening here. Either way, it wouldn't work. But for specifically, it's for proportions, you'd have to do a z. So hopefully that helps you. But that's a great question. Like the part A had you do a one interval, and then part C is basically testing you on knowing your conditions for a separate test. So that's a great question where you have one question, but you're actually hitting multiple chapters in that and asking you about conditions. So that's kind of where that goes with. So that's a good question. All right, question 4. Sabrina had a question. I forget this one is. Okay, so this is a probability question. So hopefully, okay, so all of it. So did we get part A, where the question is, if the failure rate of superigniters is 15%, what is the probability that the first 30 superigniters selected using the testing process successfully launch? So this is almost like geometric. So if the probability is 0.15, then it's the opposite. You'd have to have 30 of those. So that's why it's 0.85 to the 30th. And that's like going to be a small number or whatever it is. 0.0076. Okay, so do we get that part that's just for part A. That's like the very straightforward probability. I mean, you should have probability notation on there too. But that's that. But for the rest of it, it's a little bit tricky because for B and C, it says, given that the first 30 igniters successfully launch rockets, what's the probability that the first failure occurs on the 31st or the 32nd superigniter? So there's a couple of actually different ways that you can do this that are still correct for part B. If you're given that the first 30 trials worked successfully, you're already knowing that happened. So you kind of, okay. So if you're given that the first failure then occurs on the 31st trial, that would just be 0.15. That's on the 31st trial. If it happens on the 32nd trial, what would have happened is that it worked the first time and then didn't on the second time, because we're going in order. And then you're just going to add those two probabilities together. So you just calculate those, and that's where they get the probability. The reason that it works this way with that given is if you're given the first 30 are basically working, you can solve it like with a conditional, the 30 work, and you're looking for like the 31st. If you do it this way, it still works out to be the same. So I don't know if that confused you with that given 30. So if I do it this way, let me show you. On top, to get it to be the 31st, I would have had to have 30 successfully happen. So that's 85 to the 30th. And then the next one would be the failure. Divide by, because for probability, the conditional will go on the bottom, divide by the probability that the first 30 worked. So if you just actually use conditional probability, do you see that those are going to cancel? That's why this works. For just to find the 31st and then the 32nd. I hope that makes sense. You can solve it this way. It's not wrong to do this, but you're going to turn out with this is just going to be 0.15. And then if you do it for the 32nd, it works out exactly the same. So, so if that given statement messed you up, you can still solve it using that given value directly in your probability notation and still get that correct. So hopefully that helps with part B, Sabrina, especially with that given part. And then for C, given the first 30 successfully launch, is it reasonable to believe that the failure rate of a superigniter is less than 15%? So for this one, For C, so from part A, we know that the probability that the first 30 launch is 0.0076, which is, less than a 0.01 chance. And they, in their answer, conveyed that to an alpha level. So there's less than a 1% chance that 30 in a row would not fail. So the probability is most likely smaller. So if you use the alpha 0.05 or 0.01, like this is using your p-value. How likely is this? So most likely that probability, that p-value, it's less than or equal to an alpha that you would use, 0.05 or 0.01. And so, so yes, it is reasonable to believe that it's less than that. Because any alpha level that you would use, you'd reject that, and so you'd say it's less than 15%. So hopefully that also clears up that part. But I'm guessing B was the harder part to kind of get through. Okay, are there other questions? I figured 4 would be a question. How do we do on number 6? Oh, so we're allowed to, you can, in the actual argument that they made, they on that one said, using a significant level of 0.05 or 0.01. So you can just state, if I was using either of those standard alpha levels, I would reject either way. So, I mean, you could just even use one alpha level and say, using the standard alpha 0.05, I would end up rejecting. So there's my decision. It just makes your case stronger if you're also saying, well, even if I use alpha 0.01, I would still reject. So therefore, yes, I'm very sure of my decision. But you could have just stated 0.05. And they don't, in that kind of a situation, they won't necessarily state what the alpha level is. Usually on all of the hypothesis tests or the confidence intervals, the AP exam does state that. It's not like your book that does, like never does, which is so annoying, that your book is bold and terrible. So the AP test normally does, except for in a situation like that, you could just use alpha 0.05. Are there other questions, like question 6 or even question 1? Is there other conditions for us? It depends, not necessarily. So Sabrina asked, like on 5A, they said assume the conditions were met. They sometimes do that. I've seen that happen more in like question 6, where they're asking you to do multiple things in a question, and maybe in like part A, you've had to show everything. And then part B, they'll just say, assume the conditions are met, so that you don't have to recheck like just boatloads of conditions. So, I mean, they can do that. I would say most often they don't. But yeah, so just be very careful when you read that, because if they say the conditions are met, you don't have to check anything. You can just say, they said conditions were met, and I'm going to solve it, and that's all you have to do. So yeah, I've seen it both ways. So just be very careful with that. But then question 6 was like a linear regression problem. I don't know if you guys had any questions on that one. I could also see that being some sort of investigative task with a linear regression and separating it and doing like a 2-sample test or something like that, comparing something, especially on this one, like on C, where it's segmented it by major on that question. I don't know if anybody has questions on those, or if that was easy enough for you guys to get through. Any other questions that you guys would like to go over? Or you can ask me questions in general too. It doesn't have to be specific to these problems. But I did have you skip, I think, question 2, because that was a goodness of fit test, and that's the one of the chapters that we didn't get to, and so it's not going to be on the test. Oh, about grades. I will still, yes, drop your two lowest quizzes. Um, yeah, the only thing I was debating on is that we didn't have as many quizzes as, like, if we had kept going, we would have had chapter 14 quizzes. I would have done review quizzes and all sorts of stuff. So I think we only have 9, 10, 11, 12. I guess I did those multiple choice questions. So there's just not that many quizzes, but yes, I'll still drop two with all these weird circumstances. I'll just help you guys out. So yes, I will still do that. I don't do that till the very end though of the grading. Oh, and I did have a question for you. I think I can put a poll in the Google Classroom about the final. So I'm not going to give you a test because that's ridiculous at this point. But I'm just wondering, some people might need the points to have something in the final category to help their grade out if you're somebody who's, trying to bump your grade up to the next grade level. And we didn't have as many tests as we kind of normally would in the semester for that many points to kind of increase your grade. So I was just curious, if I like created a project, would you guys want to do that for a final? And it has to be all or nothing. It's not like you can choose to do the final. But would you guys rather have no final or do a final project as like to count in your final category of your grade? I'm not sure that I'm gonna necessarily do one or the other. I haven't made up my mind yet, but I'm just wondering what your guys' thoughts are. Project is great, as long as there's no. It would probably be Excel. It'd probably be very similar to what you guys did with the Los Angeles city data and kind of comparing, because I can get you to do kind of like stuff from all year where you do graphs, where you compare, are these significantly different or things like that. There would not be extra credit for the project, no. But I just know that some people are counting on um, those points and things, especially for some people who are still wanting to increase their grade, and we kind of don't have as many assessments as we normally would have in the year. So I'm just wondering, but I have to create it. And so I was wondering if there was interest in me doing that so that you guys could have a final portion in your grade. So it looks like there is some interest. So I'll try to do that. But yeah, it'll be very similar to that data that we did from that. And I would have you work with a partner and just turn in like a Google Doc like you guys did before. So it'd be very similar to that, and that would count as your final, so that at least have a grade in there. So okay. So I wanted to ask you guys. Well, are there any other questions? I'm sorry to those of you who are just tuning in. I realized most people said they thought it was going to be at 10 instead of 9:30, so my bad. So we've already gone over some of the questions, but are there any other questions that we have that you'd like me to go over? The mock response may be just for completion. Well, we're going to continue to do these free response practice problems. I don't think I'm going to specifically grade them for you. I mean, the nice thing about when we were in class, when I do the free response and it's your final grade, I go through and grade it like I would the AP exam. So you get a graded value going before the AP exam, so you know how you would have scored on a similar test. So that is a huge advantage to that, knowing how you would do prior to the AP exam. However, that's also in a testing environment where I have a confidential test that I know you're not looking at the answers to. so we don't really have that situation. So for me, I feel like it's kind of silly to have you do that and then have me grade it when I know you could have looked at the answers. Um, but we could maybe go over um, like a test, and I could kind of show you how I would grade it so that in one of these live calls, so that you could grade it yourself and see how your scores would turn out. Although the scoring is gonna be a little bit different because there are only 3 questions. So, but the type of the way they score it, we could still go over that, even though I was printing the AP rubric in. I put that up so that you guys can see that. But we could go over the scoring of that if that would help you. Would that is that kind of what you're asking for, Sabrina? I'm guessing you just want feedback on how you would be doing on the free response questions. Okay, so yeah, we can just go over kind of more of the scoring guidelines on some of the upcoming questions as we go over them. Yeah, so that'll help. Aiden asked, can we submit a picture of our bathroom passes for extra credit, or is that not an option for the system? Sure, we can do that. I'll have you turn those in though near the end of the semester, so in May sometime. But yes, we can do. That's fine. It's no problem. Okay, are there any other questions about this? Good. Okay. I was gonna do the next call. I felt like the Tuesday, Friday kind of works out nicely for spacing, but I'd also don't want to interfere because our class isn't normally on a Tuesday. Um, so I don't know if you guys have calls and things that you're already locked into on Tuesday in the morning. Is that a problem for you guys if I assign you a free response and then we talk about it on Tuesday? Does Tuesday morning work out okay for you guys? I mean, I know you can always watch the replay, but I feel like most people like to watch it live if they can. Okay, so good. I feel like that gives it just spaces it out a little bit more so you guys have, yeah, I can do 10. That's fine. I won't make you guys get up too early. You guys are all sleeping in now. You guys are all uh, we can do 10. I'll do it at 10 on Tuesday for that. Okay, so the next one that I'm going to have you guys do is the 2011 free response. So I will put that in the Google Classroom. I'm pretty sure it's already on my website, but I'll double check. So the scoring's on the website too. And so I'll have you do that one. And if there's any questions that you need to skip, I'll put that in the comment to skip if there's a question you need to skip. Okay, well then I will talk with you guys on Tuesday at 10 a.m. And have a good weekend. Stay safe. Enjoy the warm weather. It's supposed to be super nice. And I will talk with you guys soon. Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, I am feeling better. So it was good to talk with you guys. Bye.